recent series of interviews. Today, we are going to be covering a variety of questions with the winner of the Game Jam number 2. Just yesterday, you may have watched Game Jam number 3 finish up, and our interviewee here with me today, Peter Cassels. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Good, Joseph. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Well, Peter, today we're going to be covering a bunch of questions for you. You also participated in an interview, text-based interview, that kind of talks about where you came from, where you plan to go, right? In the recent couple of weeks, it's over on our Medium.
Yes, that's right. I did a little interview a couple of weeks ago, answered some questions. Yep, sounds about right.
Cool, cool. So today our questions are going to be different than the questions in your previous interview. In this video interview, we're going to cover some non-serious questions to kick things off, and then we're going to jump into some sandbox-related general questions, and then more deep dive questions that help us get to know you, your process in creating, and where hopefully we'll know by the end where you're going to go in the future, because you have made some significant moves in the sandbox over the last year or so. The first of which was participating in our first ever game jam, where you did pretty well. Can you tell us about that really quick?
Yeah, the first game jam I did Grey Labs. It was a 2-week game jam, I believe, so we didn't have much time back then. But I polished up a quick game with fire and ice trial. Discovered that you can make a whole room basically covered in lava or ice, and I kind of went with that idea, and the story kind of branched on its own. It wasn't really planned. And yeah, I got second place. People really enjoyed it, and I kind of kept with that series pretty much with every game jam since then. But with the latest game jam, we think we're going to leave it as a three-parter and move on to something new on the next game jam, which
Very
should be
good.
fun.
Very good. Cool. So we'll jump into the non-serious questions first off. Typically with these community interview segments, most of our people who are being interviewed don't have a lot of experience being on camera or on microphone. I can understand how that can
Same.
be sometimes a bit nerve-wracking. So I'm going to give you a simpler question right away. As we all know, Bitcoin is the number one most prevalent cryptocurrency in the world, right?
For now, yes.
Exactly. For now, we'll see how long that lasts. But for now, what do you believe one Bitcoin will be worth in a year from now?
In a year, FOMO is still real. You got institutions coming in, apparently. What are we looking at? 50,000 at the moment. I'd say about 140. We'll say 140.
Okay, $140,000 for Bitcoin. That's pretty good. Pretty good estimate. It's interesting. That's close to what I've seen from some unofficial metrics. Of course, there's no way to tell where the market's going to go, but it's pretty interesting. And how do you think, if a Bitcoin is $140,000, that would
I use
affect?
Bollinger Bands, so I kind of see how far it can stretch. When something goes too far out, usually it has to come back to the average or pull back.
Ah, yeah.
So that's what I've been. That's what I use anyway. I don't think it will affect much. I mean, you got finances collapsing around the world slowly. 75% of
Ooh.
America's money printed in the last year or two. So
Yeah, yeah.
just
That's
got to follow the events. We don't know which way the boat's going to sink, but it's sinking.
that's an interesting. That tells me a lot about you, Peter. It tells me that you're looking at things not just from a short-sighted perspective. To bring in inflation into the conversation is a much bigger box, and we could open Pandora's box with that down the road. But that was our icebreaker, and you knocked it out of the park. So I just want to make sure that we're all good to go. I've got some great comments already coming off in the chat here. So for those folks watching at the very end of this session, we will do a brief AMA coming from the community. Let me know if everything sounds good. I checked my levels. Peter was coming through, but I had a comment saying that they couldn't hear you. But we'll get back to that soon. I think that it's operating as expected. So we'll jump into the general questions section here. This is all related to the sandbox, not deep dive questions, but more basics about the sandbox and how that relates to you. And then we'll get into the advanced stuff that talks more about your history, what you have done, what you will do, etc. So,
All right.
right now, you are known for making games in the sandbox with our Gamemaker. But before we get into that deep dive, what drew you to the sandbox in the first place, and what made you excited about it?
Good question. I've been in crypto since middle of 2017, so before the big boom occurred.
Sure.
Again, um, I was fortunate enough to do it full time and cover my own full time wage. So I kind of quit my job, went on Reddit and forums, and just looked for the next big coin and researched as much as I could. That's where I stumbled against Decentraland. Most people in Sandbox will know Decentraland.
Sure.
I bought land there in the first auction. I still hold that land. Throughout the journey, though, Sandbox have released, I think it was a couple of years ago, a small trailer of what their universe is going to look like. There was probably no game maker back then, or even a very basic VoxEdit, but I knew none of that. But it was on my radar. And then when the first auction occurred for the sandbox, I think it was earlier last year, and it was successful, I hopped on board pretty quickly, actually, and pretty deep.
Sure. Good, good, good. And then, as we are now, you mentioned there was no Gamemaker back then, or it was in closed testing. As we stand today, and you've seen what the Gamemaker can do, you've been making great games with it. Obviously, you've been working on our fantastic tutorials and such in the Gitbook now. You've become a deeply ingrained part of the community, and in part of the team. What do you think that the future of the sandbox looks like, let's say, a year from now?
Huge, huge. Decentraland was a good launch, but it was an emptier world and it wasn't game related. Whereas the sandbox, people want to make games. That's what they're trying to do on the other platforms. But the sandbox have it correct, and the stuff that you can make in the sandbox is unreal. Nothing like anything else. So give it a year. If the metaverse releases, massive, huge.
Great, great. Yeah, I think when you talk about things that are unreal, I look back at some of your creations. I know that in this latest game jam, you once again had a top 10 high quality game where there were some mechanical things that, as with almost every game jam that has existed, you have kind of blown my mind a little bit. I know that in the last one, you used just a one by one space that seemed to span much more of that space. So, for those folks watching, if you go back and you check out the ceremony we had yesterday, the live streams that we produce throughout the week, people who are playing your game, you can also play those games inside the gallery with the Gamemaker right now. Uh, Taking what comes from that game, what you've done, Peter, those folks who are playing it may be able to create bigger and better games based on the innovations that you're making with the Gamemaker tools that are already exist. That's, I think, pretty amazing.
Thanks, Joseph. That's pretty much all I've been doing. Hopping on, hopping on the game maker, seeing what it can do, write some tutorials, share it with people.
That's
Pretty much
great.
it.
That is very nice. Thank you. So we have, we're going to get a little deeper on some of these questions here now. Um, Now, in a previous Game Jam contest, you created a game that you titled Gray Labs, and you nearly won with that. In the second game, you won first place. What do you think gave you the edge in those competitions?
The first one, I think it was just luck, maybe. Um, but the second, the second one, I found that teleport technique, which really helped with storytelling and the wow factor. and I had my wife help as well. Um, it definitely helps to have a second pair of eyes who likes details, and that way you can combine both worlds of the detailing and also the mechanical. And I think we work really well together when we combine our forces, which is what happened with the second and third game jam. You can see the quality is a little bit more polished, I think, when you have a girl's perspective on it.
Yeah, I think from an outside view, I know that the first one of the things that it felt to me like gave you the advantage in the first competition was the almost theatrical way that you tried to tell a story. That seemed to be unique at the time. Also, in the second game jam, when you won, for me, one of the things that stood out as a reviewer of that game was that the world continued to have more story, but in a more subtle way. Some of the more simple things, the small things that people might overlook, like checking the mailbox and it says there's no mail, were essential in standing out and making it a great title. Um, Again, when it came to Game Jam number 3, it seemed to me that you had created something that was maximum efficiency in a one by one space, while innovating, again, more so with the elevators, which used a similar technique, as far as I could tell, to the teleportation system, but significantly tweaked in order to make elevation and, that sort of thing work. Um, so far, your innovation is quite clear, and I think that makes a great edge for you. So, back on the second game jam, we've been highlighting some of the work you've done. We went behind the scenes creating your teleportation systems, thanks to tutorials you've been creating. How long did it take you to invent teleportation using the Gamemaker software?
Ah, well, there's no real timer for it. Um, it's not like I'm going to sit down and invent teleport and then bring out some blueprints.
Sure.
It's just something that I figure out. Like my mind, I like, all right, put this component. What settings does it have? What can it do? What's it not doing? How's it reacting? How can I use this bug to my advantage? And I basically, just found that worked. The teleport system worked really well. Um, but it required a lot of tweaking. So the tutorial I gave was a two-way teleport system, whereas in my second game jam there was multiple entry points, which would have been a more complicated tutorial. But essentially, you can still do the same thing if you chain it rather than have a list like I did. But now I don't think it's a very useful technique. I believe. I think there was a few errors with the update. Some people had some troubles. How did you go with that, Joseph?
Um, so far, for the teleportation system, I think it works very well. Even still, the old tutorial is functional, but we have an update coming down the pipeline that I think is going to end up fixing the old tutorial to be more functional soon. But one of those things
Awesome.
that stepped in the way of the tutorial is that, and I gave this advice out on Wednesdays when we live stream and we kind of playtest these games, is that the tutorial works best when you use an asset that's already loaded into the world, whether that asset is invisible or not, to help you spawn in that location. And you can see more about how to do this process on the Gitbook page. You can see more about it on some of our previous videos here on YouTube and Twitch. But you can, anyhow, the asset has to be in the world before you
That's
spawn the
right.
asset. And that was a major conflict, was that currently, as you mentioned, you kind of take advantage of some, we'll call them glitches, but not necessarily glitches. In this case, this is definitely something that we work on in the early alpha stages of the game maker. And the asset not being in the world got in the way of teleportation functioning. And it gets in the way of a few things. So we're going to work on making sure that all assets that would eventually load will also cache that data ahead of time. But that'll come in a future update for the game maker.
That's fantastic, and that'll make a world of difference for everyone that's new or doesn't know these little tweaks. It'll be a lot easier experience for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. So All right, so let's see. We've got, well, Peter, you're a shining example of what it means to be a part of the sandbox community as far as I'm concerned, right? I talked about it briefly on yesterday's stream that most people who are working in the sandbox, whether you're an independent artist or you create amazing guides and tutorials such as you do, or if you're a community manager as I am, most of us have started within the last few years, maybe even the last few months, coming up from within the community. Uh, right now, I kind of spoiled this question. I had this question written out. I hear that you're helping write up official tutorials and information over in the Gamemaker Academy. How's that going for you?
Yes, that's right. Basically, it's taken a lot of time, which is good. I'm basically documenting everything from how behaviors work, how components work. I've got to make GIFs to show you examples on what each behavior does. Then I write some tutorials so you can put things in your own game, like blowing up TNT and respawning it. If you want those fancy platforms, I'll be writing a tutorial in the next couple of days so you can put them in your own game. So the whole idea of the Gamemaker Academy is so you can make your own games without needing to learn the whole process like I have for the last year to work out what can and can't happen. Just follow some guides and you're done, basically making your game a lot more polished and a lot more exciting with new features.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. So we have I'm going to provide a link to the Gamemaker Academy in the chat so folks who aren't familiar with what that is can check it out here in just a second. But as we go, Peter, I think that we have some time here today. This stream was expected to run for about an hour. We have a lot of people in the chat. We don't have to run it for an hour. It's all right. I know that for those folks who aren't familiar, it is 10 a.m. where I am located, but it is 5 a.m. where Peter is. It's quite early. And this dedicated gentleman has come on at at an amazingly early hour for us here for this interview. So, Peter, if there are people in the chat right now watching and they were to ask you some questions, would you be open to an AMA session?
Of course, absolutely.
Great, great. So if you guys have some questions for us here in the chat, please leave those questions. And while you do, I am going to provide a link to the Gitbook for our AMA. And you can check out these tutorials that Peter will be working on or has been working on for the last few weeks and or months now. I know it's been an extensive amount of time I've seen you working on this. So do you have anything coming up down the pipeline potentially in the Gitbook, Peter, that we don't know about right now?
I just got to bring it up to date. Right now, if you visit it, it's not structured 100%. We're still in the middle of, putting it all together nicely. But in the future, we're going to have some really cool tutorials, and it's going to look fantastic. And you'll be able to request anything you want in Discord. So if you go through our tutorials and there's something that's not quite doing what you want it to do, and you want to know how, just send me a message and I'll write it up for you.
Very
It's pretty
good.
much that's the service we're trying to go for.
Excellent. That sounds great. I know that you've been doing, I mean, as far as I can tell, day in and day out, you're working on something here and there on the Gamemaker or on the Gitbook side for the Gamemaker. I know that we also have some tutorials on there for VoxEdit, which is the asset creation software. But you've done an excellent job of providing content that can help the users create games. And I refer people to your content every Wednesday when we do those playtest lives, and frequently as well on Saturday mornings, morning for me, where we, where we actually help sometimes use the tutorials that you have created live on our live streams.
Very entertaining streams. I love watching.
Right, so let's get to some of the questions then. First, I'm going to address a question that would be more directed at me than it would be you. Let's see. It says, are there plans to sell more regular lands? The sale on the 11th is all premium. Jeremy, yes. In an AMA asked directly to Sebastian Bourget, which is the co-owner of the company, he had mentioned that, yes, we do intend to have regular lands sold yet again. They would be sold at 1,000 sand rate when they are released. But currently, this sale is a special event celebrating the partnership with CoinMarketCap. So all of the premium lands will also include CoinMarketCap heroes. So you can check out more on the price of a premium land there on the Medium article on our main Medium page. We also have a question that says, how can we code our games? Are we working with Java, C, what have you? So currently in the Gamemaker, Peter, actually, I'm sure you could answer this question about the Gamemaker. How do you code games in the Gamemaker now?
No coding required. You just basically got to know what each field does, and once you do, you pretty much can tell the game maker what you want it to do without needing to know another language, except English.
That is true. That's true. Yes. Right. So you've got another question here. Crypto Quasar asks, "What are your computer specs you use to develop on the Gamemaker?"
Hey, dude. I've got a regular laptop. I don't have any hex core. I think it's just a normal quad core, ninth gen i5. It's a GTX NVIDIA card. I don't think it's that great. I think it's only like a 2 gig. It's a laptop. It's really bad. I'm using some of these win-ins to get a nice computer so I can develop better. I found that I couldn't play my game and record for YouTube video at the same time without it being like 15 frames per second. So I need something better.
Sure. Well, that's good to know that you can create games without having to have super high-end hardware, and then take
Definitely no.
that, right? Yeah, and be able to take that. I know there was another user who that was their target goal when they created a game in this game jam, and they ended up reaching in the top 10. So they found that they earned enough in sand that they'll be able to get themselves a nice computer upgrade and be able to make games and do a bit better as well. So that's great to hear. Great to hear that you can do it with the smaller hardware. Of course, I try to troubleshoot that with folks often, and I'm starting to learn the lower limits of what can work. And you'd be surprised at how far down or how old your PC can be while still be able to make games. Let's see
Absolutely.
here. There's Nikki McFly asks, "Have you had any previous studies uh, about building knowledge?" It seems a bit of a generic question, but what are your former studies? How well studied are you?
Uh, oh, tough question to answer. Um, I've had 38 jobs since I've left school. I'm someone that can't stay in one place, repeating 5 days a week, 40 hours a week.
Sure.
Doesn't work, especially when I've learned everything in the process and there's nothing new happening. So my knowledge, I've absorbed a lot when I go from job to job to job because they're so varied in jobs, varied people, varied processes. So I've gathered a lot of knowledge just from work experience. Then at school, uni, I did multimedia, I did web design, I've learned how to do After Effects, Photoshop. So I know a lot about computers in general, but not about coding. That's something I've never really got into besides HTML.
That's great. That's great. Well, you may have an opportunity to learn coding over time as we expand the platform. I know on our roadmap we have visual scripting is intended to come to the platform, and then after that, full code as time goes. We've got it again on the roadmap over on sandbox.game if you're interested in more information about when those release. And having created tutorials, I'm sure you're going to take it to the next level right away. As soon as it.
I'll do my best.
It seems to me that you can do whatever you want. You've already done amazing things that I didn't expect were possible initially, and you proved myself and I think everyone else wrong about that. So it's great. Aladev
More
has
than that.
asked, what inspires you to create your games, and how do you come up with the ideas?
Another tough question to answer. A lot of meditating, a lot of talking, a lot of thinking. Most people jump into the game maker and just start building, which is fine. But you need to stop and think and change things a lot. If you're not open to change and thinking, you're going to be stuck and not understand why you're not improving or things aren't getting better. It's quite important of a process, and I do try to emphasize that to a lot of people. Think, sit down, hop in a bath, go for a walk, whatever. Just think about the game, put some time and thought into the process. It helps a lot.
Yeah. And that's actually interesting because I find myself in many things running into that. And I mentioned it when I was streaming on those Wednesdays. Is that especially as we've been in this pandemic, a lot of folks find themselves in their chairs or what have you, and they get stuck. But you've got to get up and move around and breathe. And those all things you just said, right? Walk around, have a bath, like take time to let your brain get refreshed, because if you put yourself in the box for too long, at least in my experience, you get burnt out very quickly, and it's not as clear. So it's
And that's it.
excellent.
And the screen itself is a blue light. It's a hypnotic light. It puts you in a sleep state. So you're not thinking when you're staring at the screen as you could be. So get off the screen. Your eyes are adjusted to see green more than any other color because of leaves in nature. So you need to go out and look at green stuff, not your screens, to reset your brain and bring your thinking out of the sleep state. Kind of hard to explain without a lot of videos and science, but yeah, that's the basic of it
Sure,
anyway.
that's great. That's amazing. Right. So we've got a question here. Jai Turner says, we have a brilliant visual asset creation software and the ability to buy and sell through the marketplace. Do you think we'll eventually be able to create, buy, and sell audio assets? I'll leave that to you, and then I will try to address it the best that I can for my more in-depth understanding.
Audio assets.
Yeah.
You got Creative Commons issues that you got to be aware of. But besides that, it would be like any audio purchasing website, wouldn't it? Be something like that, like
Yeah,
Audio Jungle.
something like that. I believe that would be the case. We are currently developing the ability to implement custom audio function, but as you mentioned, Peter, we do have to be aware of copyright claim in certain specific regions. So this is the same as with audio or with visual assets. You couldn't necessarily go create a Mario character, Mario. If you did so, you could be rightfully claimed with international copyright law from Nintendo, right? So it's important to understand that any audio assets or visual assets that you create could be claimed as such. Right now, we have assets that we are directly importing into the Gamemaker for you to use. Those assets have been developed over the last few patches into the Gamemaker, and we'll continue to work those out over time. As we get into a state where full code is functional, it will unlock a considerable amount more things. That's a bit down the roadmap, but you can be sure that you could load audio assets from an external source in that function. So that's audio assets will be a function, but having assets for audio in the marketplace may not be. We'll have to see how that goes, because right now we have a tool for creating the visual assets for you with VoxEdit, but we don't have an audio creation tool. So more details on that as it comes down the pipeline. Ilber Orta Hali asks, how long does it take to design a game?
How long's a piece of string? So it depends on what you want to make, right? So if you want a really complicated game, it's going to take a lot longer. Depends on your details. Depends on how much testing you do. A lot of testing to break your game and then fix those breaks takes a lot of time too, not just to design.
Sure. So
Um,
to elaborate
Base
on that,
Station
yeah,
is like a month. So that one there has 3,500 assets. It takes a while to load, but there's a lot of pipes, a lot of things to look at. That one there took 4 weeks, 3 weeks of building, 1 week of talking and planning and meditating, as I was talking about earlier, and then the last couple of days of adjusting. So that one there took, I'd say, a good 200 to 300 hours.
oh wow. Well, that's and that's interesting when you think about it. As a few hundred hours, uh, it's a lot of dedication, but the process for creating a game for many developers, when you're looking with Unity or Unreal Engine or things like that, you're talking about years, right? So it's interesting to see that you could create such a high quality game in a few hundred hours. Frankly, it was. I know when we played this for the Game Jam latest, it was just again continued to amaze me. The world is very well developed. I could see a game like that getting thousands, millions of plays, depending on the audience reach when the metaverse goes live. So it'll be great to see all of your games as they go, and that little adventure. If you do publish all three, seeing that adventure published in the metaverse and how many people come visit your space and enjoy it.
Be fun. Can't wait for that. Um, yeah, everything's on a one by one. So uh, the whole idea is just to show people what you can do on one single land, and we're going to keep doing that for every game jam, I think.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear because like I said before, with the latest game you created, it seems like uh, maximum use of a one by one space in such a way that it felt like it was almost three times larger than some of the larger games that we saw published out there. So you've done excellent work with that, and I think that's going to
There's still
go
plenty of room. There's still a lot of empty room. There was just
really
performance. We couldn't add a lot more. We wanted to. So we just have to see if the game maker gets more optimized, and then the game maker will be able to do a lot more than Game Jam number 3.
right, right. And you can look forward to some optimization for sure, as
Loving it. Can't
it's
wait.
only in very early alpha, but we're experimenting with level of detail, which means that at a certain proximity or when you can't see an object, it's going to reduce the amount of system resources that's being used, which is not currently a part of the system, given that we are only in 0.41 test on the game maker. So you've done an amazing job with the software that's not quite finished yet. So let's
Cheers, man.
see if we can continue through here. Are there plans to allow assets to be given to players in conditionals? As conditionals in games, e.g., a player beats a game and gets an asset as a reward to keep. Um, Peter, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, so I'll take this just right. Um,
Go for it.
there are intentions to allow that to be a function, right? But what one caveat to that is that when you permanently gain an asset, you gain it as an NFT. So there would be a transfer of the asset from your wallet to the users who are beating your game wallet in order for it to be permanent. So that function is a function that is intended, but is not in place now for various reasons. Some of which are, if you understand
Gas fees.
yes, if you understand the deeper technical situation, we are working with multiple partners on potential implementation of layer 2. What that means is that you would use a sort of a sidechain, thanks to the new Ethereum 2.0 technology, to reduce your load on the main network of Ethereum. That means that you save a bunch of money in what Peter said, gas fees. So until that is in place, if a user was to win, let's say, a sword from your game today, roughly, as of yesterday at least, redeeming that sword would cost them $10 or $20, sometimes up to $40 worth of gas on the Ethereum main network.
What a
So
joke.
it's
40
it,
bucks for a transaction.
it's definitely something that they do intend to fix it. Again, this is not so much the sandbox as it is Ethereum mainnet, but I do have a good understanding of this. The implementation of ETH 2.0 as the software gets upgraded in the next year and a half will increase the amount of transactions per second from as maximum 64 transactions per block. That will expand to as much as 1,024 transactions per block. As you may guess, that'll make things a lot less expensive. It'll also transfer from proof of work, as it currently is, to proof of stake. But those are Ethereum-based things, and we are here with Peter today, so we're going to stick with questions related to that. But we'll look forward to lesser gas fees, faster transaction times on the main network, which will help every game that is interoperable on the Ethereum mainnet. So let's see here.
That day would be so cool. How cool would it be to have like NFTs or coins or anything like that as a reward in the game? That's huge.
Yeah, and I think that honestly, it's not far. Another way that that's possible is that if we implement a sort of a market where it is more centralized, but the long-term goal for the sandbox is to be completely decentralized, where the community has all ownership, all transfer of assets, all of it without a centralization. A short-term fix, which again, this is not I'm not a decision maker on this, so don't take this as a matter of fact. But a short-term fix would be possible if we were to centralize it, where all of the assets are essentially in the Pixel or the Sandbox wallet. If they're inside the Sandbox wallet and you authorize a transfer from your username email to another username email, then there would be no true transfer, so there would be no transfer fee, right? It's the same kind of way that if you go to a service like Binance, they use that function. You have a login, right? But when you send money to Binance, you always send it to Binance's wallet. And then when you buy and sell from someone else, it's really only accounted for in your account, not necessarily truly on the blockchain. If it was, then you'd have a transaction every time you traded, like in DeFi. So there is a way to do it, but ideally, the sandbox, our intentions are that everything is completely decentralized. And before it's done, the sandbox would have no lands, the sandbox would have no sands, and everything is in the communities. We're highly community focused. So let's get down to some new questions there. I want to work as a game creator for the sandbox. What should I do? Peter, do you yeah,
Download the Gamemaker. Start making games. Really easy.
there it is. And it really is quite that easy. If you have played around with the Gamemaker, you've made a few games, you've got yourself a little portfolio, you can also apply at gamefund.sandbox.game to be part of the Foundation Fund. In this case, the Game Fund link takes you to the Game Makers Fund, where you could be an official capacity artist if you're interested in doing so, creating games as a member of the Sandbox team. We have currently, I believe, 40 or so games that are being developed on the back end from Game Fund funding. That may be larger, that increases every day. But the last I checked, this includes games that will release for the Season 0 test that we have coming up in the metaverse. So look forward to more of that. Let's see. Jose Bryan 6 asks, what was your inspiration for building, I'm going to say Grey Labs games? Right here it says building this game, but Grey Labs games specifically.
Yeah, so the last one in Grey Station, we watched a lot of submarine documentaries. So the internals of Grey Station is pretty much submarine internals, what you'd see inside a submarine kind of feel. So we bring up pictures of engineering, command bridges, and quarters of different submarines, and we just basically built using real life examples. We like to do that a lot with our work. I think a lot of people do. You just bring up real life stuff and just use that.
That's great. I saw it as like science lab, but I could see that with the last game, definitely the inspiration from submarines, now that you mention it, especially in some of the scenes where there's quite a lot of what seems like piping going through, and that,
yes.
yeah, that's great. That sounds amazing. So let's see here. I'll answer this question here. It says, I have a question. Did the sandbox, will the sandbox have something like Roblox where you can play games in-game, or GameMaker with an assets market? So right now, we are internally testing a game client that will release soon, which will unlock what we call the metaverse, which is the gameplay side. All users will be able to have access to the metaverse for free, just as with the GameMaker software. But this is just gameplay client. So once that is completed, you're going to have a bunch of users coming in and simply just being able to play these games. Currently, you can play games that people publish into the gallery as well inside the Gamemaker if you just want to play around and see what's possible. But in the long term, you'll also see publishers that won't have published to the gallery because they want to keep deep, dark, beautiful secrets of their games until they are ready for the world to see them. So games that aren't available in the gallery will eventually be published into the metaverse. So look for that very soon. Let's see here. Da, da. Oh, yes. So another great question here. What do you find is the best size for building a game on a land? Do you think that a one by one gets cramped, or and you need more space, or are you satisfied with the one by ones?
It depends on what sort of game you want. So the winner of this last game jam, Kimson, he used 16 land, and it gives a different feel. So when you walk through it, it's more like World of Warcraft.
Hmm.
Whereas a one by one, you can see each end quite clearly and run from one end to the other within like 15 seconds or something in your sprint. So you're going to have to work out what sort of game experience you're after, what you're building, what you want your player to go through, and is your one by one going to be enough for that? Most people like to go big, and then they realize it's their first game. It looks too empty. They haven't put enough details in there. So if it's your first game, I recommend starting off small and then expand as you work out how the Gamemaker works, what you want to do. Will come naturally.
Great, that's awesome. So we've got a question here. This is a bit more personal, but not too personal. I think it's interesting. It says,
It's an open book.
Pete, are you married? And,
Uh,
and does your
yeah,
significant other despise all the time you spend creating games?
only the first game jam. When I proved that I'm actually okay at it and there's something with the sandbox in the future, then she hopped on the second game jam and the third game jam and spent just as much time on it as I did. So yeah, I guess the trick is to win money. It's okay.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think that if you're a developer aspiring to create in the sandbox and you spend some time between now and the release of the metaverse, it's important to understand that you don't just have to win money in the game jam competitions. You can earn money
Voxel it as
naturally.
well.
Exactly right. If you're creating assets with VoxEdit and you're selling those assets on the marketplace, you can get direct earnings, right? You can sell your assets for sand, and of course trade the sand for your local fiat currency if that's a demand you have. You can also, when you release in the metaverse, you can potentially have users pay to play, either on a permanent basis or on a per play basis. So you could be sort of like an arcade inside the sandbox if you like, or you can maintain the free to play status and try to get people to, as a with VoxEdit, get maybe some cool looking assets, maybe avatar assets, maybe it be world assets that you're promoting inside your game. So a lot of different opportunities for earning an income. Of course, with the game jam, as mentioned yesterday, again, our co-owner Sebastian Bourget had mentioned yesterday that this game jam will not be the biggest game jam. While we significantly improved the prize in the last game jam, first prize was something in the ballpark of, well, I think it was 25, thirty
Nearly
thousand
30,000.
dollars. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was quite well up there because it's in. We distribute the award in sand. We give away 200,000 sand to the first prize winner. The That prize will increase in the next game jam. All of the winners also were awarded a land so they could publish in the metaverse in the top 10. So that's fantastic. I know we'll be able to see your game, Peter, inside that now. So I can't wait to play it when the metaverse is live and see how that goes. So let's
Maybe
yeah, there's a great opportunity for earning an income, and that's you can go from game player to game creator to proper game studio in the long run with the sandbox. I think that's going to be pretty amazing going forward here. And then another question here. I think this is a question that may be targeted more to me, but you, I'm sure, could answer this, Pete. Will the world be truly open and free to roam? Will there be barriers to people's land? How is the map connected, or do you have to teleport?
yes, that's pretty good questions. I know there's teleport systems,
Hmm.
but that's not on every land, I believe. But I don't know how it's going to be connected, or how you're going to go from one experience to another, or how you're going to visualize the game from outside of the game, like you do in Decentraland. Not too sure, to be
Sure.
honest, but
Okay, that's right.
I'm excited to know.
So let's, I'll cover that then right here. So when you are playing in the metaverse right now, and you walk to the edge of a land, uh, and this is true whether it be a 1x1 space or a 4x4 space, when you walk to the edge of a land, where you are in adjacency, on the overtop map will actually show, and it'll have a bit of a pop-up, and it'll say, you are now transporting to this game. Would you like to go? And it'll tell you what the adjacency is. And the point of this is that while you can't see it off over the horizon, you can see the adjacent games. And it's good that they don't all load, so that you don't have the code from every single game loaded all at once, right? So that is one method of transport. The second is, as you mentioned in the question, teleporters. Teleporters will be enabled on certain game spaces. Later on in development, we do intend to release some teleporters for developers from the community, but initially teleporters will be available in social hubs, such as the TSP Social Hub, so you'll be able to test those right away and move into games that are around the metaverse map. And then as well, you can also simply pull up the metaverse map at any time. So the game client currently operates in such a way where you open the map on the website, choose where you'd like to go first, and then it will automatically open the game client and take you there. So that process will remain a feature. So the map that you see right now at the map on sandbox.game can be a mode of transport for you at any time to go anywhere. And I encourage game developers, such as Peter here, that when you create your game, leverage the fact that people can use the map. Possibly put a sign or a quest that says, did you enjoy this game? You can play more here at this location. And people can look up your location on the map and instantly go there to play your next game if you don't happen to have lands that touch each other. So, let's go ahead and move on here. Another question from Jai. It says, do you have any representatives in Australia yet? So, Peter, do we have representatives in Australia?
Just koalas and kangaroos. What else is there?
I think you, right? yeah. Peter here is from Australia, and he's serving, as a bit of a representative, right? Working on the Git book and being, at least in this interview, the face of the community right now. So it's great to work with you here, Peter, and it's always great to have these interviews with you. So let's see. Yeah, I really do. Honestly, I appreciate having a conversation with you. I mentioned yesterday, if you were watching the stream, I did a bit of a voiceover where they had a laugh. I played as God, and I had mentioned that Peter truly has that godlike voice. So it's always great to have a conversation with you, just purely because you have that narrator's tone, and I love it. Let's
$4.95 a minute.
So Aladib asks, is there something planned like free-to-play, but the option to buy in-game assets like swords? I believe I'll probably have to answer that question. And the answer is yes. Yes. Free-to-play is a function right now. Now, if we're talking about for developers, this would be more of a function of, let's say, as I mentioned, if you load into a game and your game is free to play as a developer, you would need to have a showcase that says, you can get this weapon. So all of the items that you create, any kind of asset that you create, can work with the gems and catalyst system to increase or decrease their power level, or change what their power level is. Even if you sell someone your sword, let's say, they can actually reslot all the gems in the sword to give it a different kind of power level. So instead of having a power sword, they could have a magic sword, or forgo all of that and have a pure luck sword. So it's definitely up to each individual developer whether you want to do that or not. I would recommend that you make sure that the games that you create are balanced in such a way that you don't need to have super powerful armor or super powerful weapons, but that it is maybe only a bit helpful to do so. And we, of course, have worked on that balance quite a bit on the back end, so that you can't just necessarily go purchase a legendary sword and go hack and slash through anything you like. But as a developer, you are going to have
Oh,
that. You're going to have that. You're going to have to balance for that, I suppose, is just what I'm saying. So keep that in mind when you create your games. And if you're not sure if it feels like it is balanced, you can again join us on Wednesdays here on this stream where we can review and go over your game experiences and check them for at least my perception of that balance. I am not the end all be all though, so check with your friends, check with your family, have them play your game and see how it works for them.
I'll even play it for you if you want. Just
That'd,
ask.
that'd be great. That'd be great. So Peter, we're coming up to the end of the session here. Within the next couple of minutes, where can we find you? How can we reach out to you? What can we follow for you? Tell me about what is going on with you and how you'd like to promote that.
Okay, yeah. I'm always on Discord, so if you want to know anything or ask me questions, feel free to hop on Discord. I'm always there. I've got my own Twitter as well, but I'm not really big on socials, to be honest. But yeah, I live on Discord, so if you ever want to ask anything, just hop on.
All right, that's great. That's great.
Um,
So,
I'm I'm making Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Joseph. I worked out how to do RNG in the sandbox already.
really,
I can have fights that are random. I can do dice rolls. I can do all sorts of things now. So I'm going to make the next game pretty interesting.
that sounds pretty amazing. I I can't wait to see when not only you create the games based on those RNGs, but then you also take the hood off for us and show us how that really works. Oh, that's going to
A
be
lot of
very
fun. I discovered it after the last game jam entry was submitted, so
sure.
it's not in the last one. Might be in the next one though.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So I look forward to more of that, more RNG based things coming here from CyberDragon, and more of these sort of interviews in the future. Again, if you want to come back on Wednesdays and Saturdays here on the Sandbox, you can see more about game development as we go week to week. The game jam has just finished, but another game jam will be coming down the pipeline. And as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Peter. And
Thank you, Joseph. Pleasure.
can't wait to see you next time.
Awesome. Sounds good. Take care, man.
All right.